My son Marcus said I was too needy, too demanding, and too secondary to matter. So he chose his in-laws for every holiday, every milestone, every moment that used to belong to us. But I wasn't needy. I wasn't secondary. While he thought I'd accept my place at the bottom of his priority list, I was already planning to make him theirs to worry about instead of mine. This is how I turned the woman who raised him into the woman who walked away, and left him exactly where he put me. Last in line, but this time in their house, with their rules, with their disappointment raining down on him every single day until he understood what secondary really meant. I raised Marcus alone after his father walked out when he was 6. No child support, no weekend visits, just me and a boy who needed everything I had to give. I worked double shifts at the diner, my feet swelling in those white shoes until I could barely walk. I missed my own birthday parties because Marcus had Little League games. I drove a 15-year-old Honda with a broken air conditioner through 3 summers because his school clothes came first. When he wanted to play piano, I cleaned houses on weekends to pay for lessons. When he needed a computer for high school, I sold my mother's pearl necklace, the only thing of value she'd left me. I never remarried, never dated seriously because Marcus came first. Always first. Every man who showed interest got told the same thing. I come with a son and he's my priority. Most of them walked away. The ones who stayed never lasted because they couldn't understand that my heart belonged to the boy who called me mama and meant it with his whole chest. I put Marcus through college by taking out loans against my house. I worked 3 jobs his senior year, sleeping 4 hours a night because I wanted him to graduate without debt. I wanted him to start his adult life free the way I never could. When he walked across that stage in his cap and gown, I cried until my mascara ran black streams down my cheeks. 22 years of sacrifice, and there he was, my beautiful boy ready to take on the world. That same year he met Rebecca. She was pretty, ambitious, from a family with money and connections. Her parents owned a successful accounting firm. They had a lake house, took European vacations, sent their daughter to private schools I could never afford. I was happy for Marcus. I wanted him to have the kind of life I couldn't give him, the kind of stability that came with marrying into a family that never had to choose between groceries and electricity. The shift started small, so small I convinced myself I was imagining it. Marcus used to call me every Sunday, but after the engagement those calls became every other week, then monthly. When I asked about it, he said, "Rebecca and I have been busy with wedding planning, Mom. Her parents are helping us coordinate everything." I wasn't invited to help plan. I found out the wedding date from a save-the-date card in my mailbox. At the engagement party held at Rebecca's parents' sprawling suburban home, I sat alone at a small table near the kitchen while her family filled the center tables. Marcus introduced me to Rebecca's relatives as my mother, not my mom, like I was a stranger playing a role. When Rebecca's mother, Patricia, gave a speech about welcoming Marcus into their family, she never mentioned me. I watched my son smile and nod like this was natural, like I hadn't been his family for 28 years. The wedding planning got worse. Every decision went through Rebecca's parents first. The venue, Patricia's country club. The flowers, Patricia's preferred florist. The guest list, limited to 50 people per side, but somehow Rebecca's side grew to 70 while mine stayed at 30. When I asked Marcus about it, he sighed like I was being difficult. "Mom, they're paying for most of it. We have to be reasonable." I offered to contribute what I could, maybe $2,000 I'd been saving for a vacation I'd never take. Marcus patted my hand like I was a child. "That's sweet, Mom, but it's handled." The wedding day itself was beautiful and heartbreaking. I wore a navy dress I'd bought on sale and had tailored to fit right. I sat in the second row, not the first. Rebecca's parents sat front and center, beaming like they'd raised Marcus themselves. During the reception, Marcus danced with Patricia before he danced with me. When he finally did take my hand, the song was almost over, and I could see him looking over my shoulder at Rebecca's table, counting the minutes until he could get back to them. After the honeymoon, the real distance began. Sunday dinners became a thing they did at Patricia's house. When I called to invite them over, Marcus would say, "We already committed to Rebecca's parents this week. Maybe next time." Next time never came. Christmas morning used to be ours, Marcus and me opening gifts in my small living room, drinking coffee from the mugs he'd made me in elementary school art class. Now Christmas morning belonged to them. I got Christmas afternoon if I was lucky. The breaking point came on Marcus's 30th birthday. I'd been planning for weeks, saving money to take him to his favorite steakhouse, the one we'd gone to for every birthday since he turned 18. I called him a month ahead to make sure he was free. "Of course, Mom," he said. "It's a tradition." I made reservations, bought him a watch I couldn't afford, wrapped it in paper I picked out special because it matched his eyes. 3 days before his birthday, he called. "Mom, I'm really sorry, but Rebecca's parents surprised us with tickets to a wine tasting weekend in Napa. It's for my birthday and it's already paid for. We leave Friday." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What about dinner? We always do dinner on your birthday." There was silence, then a sigh. "I know, but this is a big deal. Patricia put a lot of thought into this. Can we do dinner when I get back?" I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my kitchen staring at the wrapped present on my counter and realized I'd been replaced. Not by Rebecca, not really. By her parents, by their money, by their ability to give him things I never could. I'd spent 30 years being his first choice, and now I wasn't even his second. I was whatever came after everyone else's plans were made. That weekend, while Marcus was in Napa Valley toasting his birthday with people who'd known him 3 years, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for scraps anymore. I wasn't going to beg for time that used to be mine by right. I was going to step back, all the way back, and let him see what life looked like when I stopped trying to stay in it. I was going to give him exactly what he seemed to want. A life where I didn't matter enough to inconvenience his real priorities. The watch stayed wrapped on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks. When he finally called to reschedule our dinner, I told him I was busy. "Maybe next time," I said, using his words. He sounded surprised, like it had never occurred to him that I might have other plans. I didn't announce my decision to anyone. I didn't have a dramatic confrontation or demand explanations. I just stopped. Stopped calling first. Stopped sending care packages. Stopped asking about their weekend plans or trying to wedge myself into their busy lives. Felt strange at first, like holding my breath, but then it felt like freedom. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every canceled plan, every last-minute change, every time I came second to Rebecca's parents. Marcus's birthday in Napa. Christmas moved to December 23rd because they were spending Christmas Day with Patricia and Robert. Easter brunch canceled because they were going to Rebecca's cousin's house instead. Mother's Day dinner shortened to 1 hour because they had plans with the other grandparents afterward, even though there weren't any grandchildren yet. I documented it all, not for revenge but for clarity. I needed to see it written down to believe it was real. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, loved alone, sacrificed everything for, had decided I was optional. Not just secondary but expendable. The notebook filled up faster than I expected. 3 months of entries, and I had 20 pages of proof that I'd become a footnote in his life. During those quiet months, I started rebuilding myself. I joined a book club at the library. I signed up for painting classes at the community center. I made friends with women my own age who understood what it meant to pour everything into your children and watch them fly away. I learned that I was 55 years old and had forgotten who I was outside of being Marcus's mother. The plan formed slowly, naturally, like water finding the path of least resistance. I wasn't plotting dramatic revenge or trying to hurt him. I was simply going to give him exactly what he'd been asking for without knowing it. Complete freedom from me. No more guilt about canceled dinners or forgotten phone calls. No more having to choose between his mother and his in-laws. I was going to remove myself from the equation entirely and let him live with the consequences. I started small. When he called to invite me to Rebecca's birthday party, I was busy. When they wanted me to come to their housewarming, I had other plans. I wasn't lying exactly, I was just prioritizing other things the way he'd taught me to do. I was learning to be secondary to my own life instead of secondary to his. The beauty of it was that Marcus didn't notice at first. He was so used to me being available, so comfortable with me being flexible, that my absence felt like relief rather than loss. He got what he thought he wanted. No pressure from me, no competition for his time, no need to balance his priorities. But slowly, gradually, he would learn that getting what you want isn't always the same as wanting what you get. The real work began when I started saying no consistently and without explanation. When Marcus called to invite me to Rebecca's work party, I said, "I can't make it, but thanks for thinking of me." When he asked why not, I said, "I have other plans." I didn't elaborate. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer alternatives. This confused him more than anger would have. "Mom, you're being weird," he said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "You used to want to be involved in everything." I let silence stretch between us before saying, "I'm just learning to prioritize the way you taught me to." He didn't know how to respond to that. Meanwhile, I was building a life that had nothing to do with him. I took a pottery class and discovered I had good hands for shaping clay. I joined a hiking group and started spending weekends in nature, breathing air that didn't smell like disappointment. I dated a man named Frank, a retired teacher who liked to cook and didn't expect me to talk about my son every 10 minutes. For the first time in decades, I was interesting because of who I was, not what I'd sacrificed. The pivot point came when Marcus called in a panic. "Mom, Rebecca's pregnant. We wanted you to be the first to know." I congratulated him, genuinely happy, but when he started talking about how excited Patricia was about being a grandmother, how she'd already bought a crib and started planning the nursery, I realized this was my moment. This baby was going to be raised by Patricia's standards, in Patricia's world, with Patricia's values. I could fight for my place as grandmother, or I could let them have what they clearly wanted: complete control. "That's wonderful, Marcus," I said. "Patricia must be over the moon." He paused, probably expecting more enthusiasm. "She is. She's already talking about turning their guest room into a nursery for when we visit. Their guest room, not mine. Their house, not mine. Their grandbaby raced their way. I made my choice right there." "I'm so happy for you both," I said. "Patricia will be such a devoted grandmother." I meant it, but not the way he thought I did. Patricia wanted to be the primary grandmother? Perfect. She could handle all the responsibilities that came with it. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as Patricia took over every aspect of the pregnancy. She went to doctor's appointments with Rebecca. She threw the baby shower. She decorated the nursery. When Marcus called to update me on Rebecca's progress, he mostly talked about what Patricia was doing, what Patricia was buying, what Patricia was planning. I listened and made appropriate sounds, but I was really listening for something else. How much work Patricia was putting in, how many expectations she was building up, how much she was investing in controlling this grandchild's life. The more involved Patricia became, the more I stepped back. When they asked me to help plan the baby shower, I was busy. When they wanted me to go shopping for baby clothes, I had other plans. I sent a nice gift from the registry and a card with a brief note. I wasn't being cruel, just distant. Professional. Polite. The way you treat secondary people. Marcus started noticing my absence more as the due date approached. "Mom, you haven't been very involved in the pregnancy," he said during one of our monthly phone calls. Rebecca's feelings are a little hurt. I almost laughed. Rebecca's feelings were hurt that the woman they'd relegated to the back row wasn't fighting for a front seat? I didn't want to overstep, I said. Patricia has everything so well handled. The silence on his end told me he was starting to understand what I was doing, but it was too late to change course now. When baby Emma was born, I visited the hospital during the designated visiting hours, brought a gift from the registry, held my granddaughter for exactly 15 minutes and left. Patricia was there all day, directing nurses, taking photos, making lists. I kissed Marcus on the cheek, told him I was proud of him, and went home to my own life. If I cried in my car in the parking lot, that was between me and God. The first sign that my plan was working came when Emma was 3 months old. Marcus called me at 7 in the morning, sounding frazzled. Mom, we need help. Rebecca's going back to work next week and Patricia's been watching Emma every day, but Patricia's getting overwhelmed. She keeps calling us with questions about everything. Feeding schedules, sleep routines, what clothes Emma should wear. She wants us to come over twice a day to check on things. I sipped my coffee and waited for him to continue. And Mom, Patricia's starting to have opinions about how we're raising Emma. She thinks Rebecca's nursing schedule is wrong. She bought Emma clothes Rebecca doesn't like. She rearranged our diaper bag because she said we were doing it inefficiently. Rebecca's starting to get stressed about leaving Emma there. That sounds challenging, I said, genuinely sympathetic but not offering solutions. There was a pause. We were wondering if maybe you could help out some days. Split the babysitting with Patricia. Give her a break. Here was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when my absence became inconvenient instead of convenient. Oh, Marcus, I wish I could, but I'm not really available for regular babysitting. I have my pottery classes, my hiking group, my book club. I've built quite a schedule for myself. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus said, Mom, this is your granddaughter we're talking about. I could hear the confusion in his voice, the assumption that of course I'd drop everything for Emma the way I'd always dropped everything for him. I know, sweetheart, and I love her dearly. I'm just not in a position to provide childcare. Patricia seems to have things well in hand. Another pause. But Patricia's getting overwhelmed. She's 68, Mom. She can't handle a baby every day. I almost said, I'm 55 and could handle it just fine, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I said, have you considered professional daycare? I could recommend some good places. The conversation ended awkwardly with Marcus clearly frustrated by my response. 3 weeks later he called again. Mom, we have a problem. Patricia's back went out from lifting Emma's car seat. She's supposed to rest for 2 weeks, but we can't afford to take that much time off work. The daycare has a waiting list. We're kind of desperate. I'm so sorry to hear about Patricia's back, I said. That must be very painful for her. I waited. Marcus cleared his throat. Could you possibly watch Emma for a few days? Just until Patricia's feeling better. This time I was ready. I'm afraid that won't work for me. I'm going out of town this weekend with my hiking group, and then I have a pottery exhibition next week. But I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're resourceful. I could practically hear his jaw drop. Mom, what's going on with you? This isn't like you. You used to be so involved, so helpful. Now it's like you don't care about Emma at all. That stung, but I kept my voice steady. I care about Emma very much. I also care about respecting the boundaries you and Rebecca have established. You've made it clear that Patricia is the primary grandmother, and I don't want to overstep or interfere with her system. We never said Patricia was the primary anything, Marcus protested, but we both knew that wasn't true. Every choice, every holiday, every major moment had gone to Patricia first. I'd just been too slow to recognize it. I'm sure you'll work it out, I said again and hung up. The calls became more frequent and more desperate over the next month. Patricia's back wasn't healing as quickly as expected. Rebecca was stressed about work. Emma wasn't sleeping well for anyone except Patricia, which made Patricia feel even more pressured to be available. The weight of being the primary grandmother was crushing a woman who'd thought it would be all joy and no work. Then came the call that told me my plan was working perfectly. Marcus's voice was tight with exhaustion. Mom, Patricia and Robert are talking about retiring early and moving to Florida. They say the stress of full-time grandparenting is too much for them. They want to be involved but not responsible for daily care. I made sympathetic noises while secretly marveling at the irony. The woman who'd pushed me out of major grandmother duties was discovering that those duties came with major responsibilities. That's a big decision for them, I said. The problem is, if they move to Florida, we won't have reliable childcare. Rebecca's already taken all her sick days covering when Patricia couldn't watch Emma. We're going to have to find professional care, which is expensive, and Emma's used to family now. Here it was. The ask I'd been waiting for. The moment when I stopped being secondary and started being necessary. But I wasn't going to make it easy. Marcus, I said carefully, I need you to understand something. For the past year, you and Rebecca have made it very clear that Patricia is the grandmother who matters. She's been to every doctor's appointment, every milestone, every important moment. She's the one Emma knows best, the one you call when you need help, the one whose opinions you value. I've respected that choice, but it means I've built a different life for myself. Mom, he started, but I continued. I'm not available to be backup grandmother, Marcus. I'm not available to fill in when Patricia's busy or tired or overwhelmed. If you want me to be involved in Emma's life, really involved, then we need to have a different conversation about what that means. But I won't be secondary anymore. I won't be the grandmother you call when the primary grandmother isn't available. The silence was so long I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. What kind of conversation? The kind where you decide whether you want Patricia to be Emma's primary grandmother, with all the responsibilities that come with that, or whether you want to share those responsibilities equally between us. Because what you can't have is Patricia getting all the good parts while I get called in for emergencies. Another long pause. I never thought of it that way. I know you didn't. You've been having your cake and eating it too for so long you forgot someone had to bake it. The next few weeks were revealing. Marcus and Rebecca tried to navigate parenthood without reliable grandparent support, and it was harder than they'd anticipated. Professional daycare was expensive and impersonal. Patricia, now recovered but wary of overcommitting again, was only available part-time and with boundaries. They'd lost their backup support system by taking it for granted. Marcus called me one evening, and for the first time in months, he sounded like my son instead of Patricia's project. Mom, I messed up. I know I did. I got so caught up in Rebecca's family and what they could offer that I forgot what you'd already given. I'm sorry. I'd waited so long to hear those words, but now that they came, I realized apologies weren't enough. I appreciate that, Marcus. But sorry doesn't fix the pattern. If you want me back in your life, in Emma's life, it has to be different this time. How different? Christmas morning comes back to me every other year. Sunday dinners rotate between my house and Patricia's. Emma spends weekends with me, not just when Patricia's busy. I get invited to doctor's appointments and milestones, not just told about them afterward. I'm not the backup plan, I'm one of two equal grandmothers. I could hear him discussing it with Rebecca in the background, hushed but urgent. Finally, he came back to the phone. What if Patricia doesn't agree to that? Then Patricia can handle full-time grandmother duties on her own, and you can see how that works out for everyone. I paused. But Marcus, if I come back into this, I'm coming back all the way. No more being pushed aside when something better comes along. No more being secondary in my own granddaughter's life. The arrangement we worked out wasn't perfect, but it was equitable. Patricia kept her role as Rebecca's preferred parenting advisor, but I became Emma's regular weekend caregiver. Christmas alternated between houses. Patricia got the elaborate birthday parties, I got quiet bedtime stories and morning pancakes. It wasn't what I'd originally wanted, but it was honest. The most satisfying part wasn't getting my place back, though. It was watching Patricia realize that being the primary grandmother was a job, not just a privilege. She'd fought for the title without understanding the responsibilities. She'd wanted control without accountability. When Emma started calling her Nana Pat and asking for Grandma Ruth's house when she was tired or cranky, Patricia began to understand what she'd signed up for. 6 months into our new arrangement, Patricia pulled me aside at Emma's first birthday party. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much work it was being the main grandmother. I thought it was all fun and no responsibility. I understand now why you stepped back." I nodded. "Being needed is different than being wanted," I said. "I thought Marcus needed me, but he just wanted me available when convenient. Now Emma actually needs both of us equally, and that's better for everyone." As I watched Emma toddle between both her grandmothers at her party, I realized my plan had worked better than I'd hoped. I hadn't just reclaimed my place in her life. I'd taught everyone involved what equal really meant. Patricia had learned that primary came with permanent responsibility. Marcus had learned that backup didn't mean lesser. Rebecca had learned that 2 committed grandmothers were better than 1 overwhelmed one. And I'd learned that sometimes the best way to stop being secondary is to refuse to be secondary, even when that refusal costs you everything you thought you wanted. 2 years later, Emma calls both her grandmothers equally. She knows Patricia's house has the fancy playroom and organic snacks, but she knows Grandma Ruth's house has pancakes shaped like animals and stories that last until she falls asleep. She loves us both, but differently, and that difference is what makes it work. Marcus still goes to Patricia and Robert's for some holidays, but he comes to mine for others. He learned that choosing sides wasn't necessary if both sides were equally valued. Rebecca learned that having 2 grandmothers who felt respected meant 2 grandmothers who were actually helpful instead of one who was resentful and one who was overwhelmed. I kept my pottery classes and my hiking group and my book club. I kept Frank, who learned to love Emma in his quiet way and never asked me to choose between my granddaughter and my own happiness. I built a life that didn't revolve around being needed, which made being needed feel like a gift instead of a burden. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before Marcus pushed me aside, always available, always flexible, always willing to come second to whatever seemed more important. That woman spent 30 years thinking that sacrifice equaled love, that being needed meant being valued. She confused serving with being served, giving with being given to. The woman I became understands that love without boundaries is just enabling. That being available for everything means being valued for nothing. That secondary is a choice, not a sentence, and you can choose differently at any time. Marcus understands it too now in his way. Last Mother's Day, he gave me a card that said, "Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't mean being taken for granted." Inside he'd written, "I'm sorry it took losing you to learn how to keep you." I forgave him, of course. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means moving forward with wisdom instead of just hope. It means loving someone enough to let them face the consequences of their choices, even when those choices hurt you both. Emma's 3 now, and she's learning that both her grandmothers love her fiercely, but that love has different shapes. Patricia's love comes with structure and schedules and educational toys. My love comes with patience and stories and the understanding that sometimes a child just needs to be held without being improved. The notebook I kept during those quiet months sits in my desk drawer now. Not as evidence of wrongs committed but as proof that patterns can be broken. That secondary can become equal if you're willing to walk away from unequal. That sometimes the people who love you most need to lose you a little to learn how to keep you right. I'm not secondary anymore, not in Emma's life or my own. I'm exactly where I chose to be, present, valued, and necessary in the ways that actually matter. Marcus learned that having two committed grandmothers was better than having one taken for granted backup and one overwhelmed primary. And Patricia learned that being chosen first means being responsible first, which isn't always the honor it appears to be. They thought I'd accept being secondary forever because I'd accepted it for so long. They didn't know I was just waiting for the right moment to show them what primary really costs, and what secondary can choose to become when it finally decides it's worth more than whatever's left over after everyone else gets their fill.